Bren, I've got another script I need you to write, and we gotta get it done quickly, so we don't have enough time for an animation. Wait a minute. So, the Odyssey DLC came out, and the reaction to it was positive, to say the least. Really set itself as a great foundational DLC like Ideology and Biotech. That being said, there might be a few tips and tricks people could know about when playing this DLC, so join me as I go over some advice that I wish I had when I first started. I'm sure my pawns also did. Sit back, relax, maybe afterwards listen to William Shatner's rendition of Rocket Man as I give you some great Odyssey advice. Number 1. First bit of advice. When making your ship, set up 1, maybe 2 entrances and make sure they are long, always. The reason for this is mostly to force any invaders to have to go in single file, which makes it easier to hit them at choke points. So, why 2 entrances? Well, given you will be doing some travel to stations or other unpredictable areas, the ability for pawns to go out in different ways could be helpful. More so if you are landing at an area just to scavenge. However, more than 2 entrances in a ship can cause problems, so keep that in mind. Number 2. Now, after you make your entrance, lead it into a kill box. Yeah, bring the kill box with you on the ship. Sure, when you land somewhere, you could chop down a bunch of trees, make a compound around your ship, and kill box that way, but if you are out in space, that won't be an option. This is why I suggest a long hallway that forces enemies in single file. Makes blasting them a whole lot easier. Don't rely on your ship for everything. This might seem counterintuitive, but it's true. With the grav ship, space is always going to be a factor. For example, butchery can be an outside of the ship thing, since you can land, make a butchery and corpse storage room in there, and hunt to your heart's content. You don't need a kitchen on the ship, since you can always use nutrient paste, and if you want spare food, package survival meals at rest stops. It's little stuff like this that saves you on space for more important stuff like fabrication benches, research rooms, storage, and so on. Things that take longer and you will be constantly pumping out in space or on the ground. Optionally, things that could be on a ship keep as small as possible, like a jail cell with 1 or 2 beds, a small barn, and so on. So yeah, landing on tiles to get resources or build new ones could be a way to help mitigate spatial problems. Number 4. Speaking of space, if you have ideology, think about trying to add a precept that prefers barracks. A good way to save up on space is to focus on a barracks setup as opposed to room setups. Only exception is the hospital that should have its own room for obvious reasons. Number 5. I also recommend focusing less on quantity of crewmates and instead quality. Focus on making a band of brothers type of situation where everyone contributes. This will not only reduce space needs, but if you ask me, really fits the vibe of Odyssey. I recommend a max of 5 to 8 pawns, which should be enough to fill most roles. Now I want to take a pause here to talk about my personal life and some recent changes. You ever just wake up one day and think, wait, this isn't where I thought I'd be by now? Yeah, that's kind of where I've been lately. I always pictured that by this age I'd have things more figured out, like career stable, relationships are smooth, totally grounded in who I am, but the truth is I've been feeling a little lost. Like I'm living in this weird in-between space, not totally starting over, but definitely not where I expected to be. And that gap between what I imagined and what's real, it's been messing with my head. There's this low-key voice in the back of my mind like, you're falling behind, or everyone else has it together except you. And even though I know that's not true, it's hard not to feel it sometimes. I think what really hit me was going through some major life shifts recently in the past year, losing family members that used to define me, starting something new, trying to rebuild confidence from scratch. It made me realize how much my identity was tied to people outside of me, and how shaky that can be when they change. And for a long time, I told myself I didn't need therapy, that I could figure it out on my own, that things weren't bad enough yet to justify talking to someone about my problems. But honestly, that mindset was just holding me back. Therapy isn't about being broken. It's about being honest with yourself and getting some help to sort out the mess that life can be sometimes. And that's why I love what BetterHelp is doing. A therapist will listen, ask questions, and help you see things from new perspectives. They can give you advice and techniques to make positive changes in your life. BetterHelp is the sponsor of this video, and they're on a mission to make starting therapy easier. Fill out a questionnaire and you will match with a therapist in as little as a couple days. Easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost, and if it's not the right fit for you. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Click the link in the description or go to https://betterhelp.com/Newbert and get 10% off your first month of therapy. I used them myself for a while in the past year, and I do think it's pretty good. Number 6. If you have the Biotech DLC, then here is where I say to focus on robots. Robots for defense, offense, and day-to-day life for an Odyssey Robotics playthrough. Try for 2 to 3 Mechanitors. Not only will it allow them to spread the mechanoid work, but it will allow you to, say, focus one Mechanitor on defensive mechs, another offensive or worker bots. This will allow you to run a colony without needing as many pawns. I recommend for workers plenty of haulers and a few fabricators, though constructors to help with maintenance can be good. Not to mention tunnelers, both for a bit of offensive and being a machine of metal mining machinations. Yes. For combat droids, scythers for good melee fighting, centipedes for great coverage, and war queens for their ability to summon more mini-mechs for distraction and durability. However, any combat mechs are good. Go nuts with Militors if you must. Though this leads into the question of what to do with waste packs. Number 7. Well, for waste packs, just freeze them, and when you go into space, dump them. Yeah, I'm not kidding. If you land on an asteroid or abandoned station, just dump them all in there and take off. No one cares. I mean, except the scavengers and mechanoids, but they don't count. Alternatively, if you land in a tile that has an underground bunker, drop them off in there. It's like dropping waste packs off in underground caves made in Anomaly. Number 8. Veering back to mechanoids, if you are going to focus on them more, I recommend building the outer rooms to only housing them, what their jobs are and not having oxygen or heat in there. After all, last I checked, robots don't need to breathe, and if enemy pawns break through those rooms, they have mechs to deal with on top of a lack of air and heat. Of course, more importantly, you save on power, and in this trying time, every bit counts. Number 9. Now, something you really need to make for your ship is biofuel refineries and hydroponics. Basically, thanks to the grav ship using chem fuel, you are gonna need a lot of, especially if you want to go far. Might as well take advantage of that with chem fuel power generators as well. For hydroponics, rice for paste, simple meals, and of course, chem fuel. If you don't plan on going the route of butchering literally all the wildlife and raiders who come knocking on your doorstep and every tile you land on, other stuff to focus on is cloth for new clothing plus a good trade item. Heal root for its obvious applications, and optionally, depending on how you run things, psychite and smoke leaf for either trade goods, items to help control a pawn's mood, or just if you want to roleplay Tony Montana in space. Actually, you know what? That's a cool idea. I'm writing that one down for later run. Fibercorn is another optional cause. Wood could be used for chem fuel, as well as furniture building items or for tile rest stop compounds. Yes. Number 10. Vents are more important now. If you want to save on resources and power, use vents to vent oxygen and heat throughout a grav ship. Trust me, you will thank me later. Not to mention, did you know you could also set up vents on the wall of your grav ship? The outside wall, you know, the one that is in space, feels like opening up for air is going to be a problem. But trust me, it's more useful than you think. You can use these to flash freeze your storage room, keep your stuff nice and cold, even though scientifically I feel like some items will boil away in a vacuum. Can someone explain to me in the comments about the exact science on that? Number 12. Oh, and the vents set up a hallway between where your prison is and to the ship. The reason for that is, in the event of a breakout, you could always open up the vent. Very funny to mess with riots that way, of course. Shame you can't lock them in, cause prison breaks have prisoners get the ability to unlock doors, which is kinda late. Number 13. When it comes to engines, you are limited to 4 small engines and 6 large engines. I recommend keeping them all together and make sure your pawns can fix them from inside of a ship. Like nutrient paste dispensers, they act as walls of their own, so making sure your pawns work on them from within the ship is a good idea. Speaking of engines, you can't build behind the actual engine because there has to be clear space. But did you know, if you build exactly around the area of the engine, you could wall in the engines? I have no idea how this makes sense physically, but you can have your engine somehow in the middle of your ship, though it can be considered useful and a bit stylish. Number 15. I say useful mostly because guess what? Somehow pirates can steal your engines and even your grav core. I legit have no idea how that is possible, but man is it hilarious. Until you find out that it could take upwards of 2, maybe more in-game years to get a new grav core quest. So do yourself a favor and protect your grav cores and engines in the early game when resources are a little more scarce. Number 16. You can fish within your grav ship. Just land on the water, deconstruct the flooring from within, and harvest those fish in the sci-fi equivalent of ice fishing. This can be a useful one because fish means meat, especially if you are just landing to get new supplies, and 2, it's just silly and had to share it. Though make sure you remember to plug the floor before going back into space. Those drafts can be a bit deadly. And if the area is frozen, you just need the room to be hot to melt the ice. Number 17. By the way, did you know you don't need walls to actually leave a tile? Yeah, this one surprised me, but all you need is the grav core, fuel tank with chem fuel, engine, and the control console. You can go full magic carpet ride with this one, as some kind of weird transport pod, and I for one love it. Great if you need to escape a bad situation. You can in fact drop everything and leave. Do note, for obvious reasons, don't go to space with this. I feel like your trip is gonna end badly. Number 18. Never underestimate the value of shuttles. They are great for trade runs, rescues, and of course, for dropping the whole squad on some poor schmuck's home. If you can make one, do it. However, do keep in mind you will have to carry it on the ship. There are 2 ways to do that. The first, set up some flooring on the outside of the ship and park it in there. I don't think it's a good idea. Instead, make it an inner outdoor area in your ship. Connect a passage to get in mentioned earlier, and now you got a shuttle area. You could also use it for mineral scanners when on the ground, or for shuttle pickup and drop-off points for quests. Drop pod raids could be a problem to set up some turrets though in the middle of there. It could help a bit. Number 19. By the way, when it comes to traveling, before you land on a tile, make sure to check the tile's landmarks, because you might be going into an area with a few extra surprises you weren't expecting. Always look before you leap, as the saying goes. This also brings up another point. While a lot of landmarks are about structures like tile might have, it also can refer to a type of change in the environment, like soil fertility or natural animal and plant growth. Some places are better to camp at than others, so keep an eye out for the good spots. Number 20. Did you know that you don't have to make your ship out of steel only? Yeah, turns out the grav ship hulls can be made out of a lot of different things, including gold and silver. I don't recommend that as they are weaker than steel, but you can. It's possible. But biofrite, plasteel, and uranium are the best choices for hulls for their strength, albeit a bit harder to collect. A lot of without mod. Yeah, it's a bit tough without the mods. Still, good to know I can have the most blinged out ship that will summon every raider from here to Tatooine. Number 21. When it comes to stockpiles, try to keep your main stockpiles in a centralized location within the ship. I say this because last thing you want is an explosive firefight suddenly turning your valuables into worthless scrap. Then again, suppose this advice is for any Rimworld base. Number 22. Chem fuel should be kept separate from the stockpile within its own enclosed space. Given how valuable chem fuel is, more now than ever, one spark of a flame or errant explosion could be a disaster for your stockpile. Trust me on this. Once we've all had stories of our chem fuel stockpile going up in flames and an entire base going up in flames with it. Number 23. Take advantage of the new armor stands. Set them up near ship exits, perfect for the early game when you don't have power armor that acts as vac suits. Use this to allow for a quick change from vac suits to more normal armored gear when on land, or go from armored gear to vac suits when up in space. Plus, they just look cool as decorations, which is always a plus. Number 24. Batteries. Okay, seriously, do not sleep on batteries. They can in fact save your pawn's life. Given now, in order to keep a constant power flow in your ship, especially in space, when it comes to vacuum doorways, oxygen plus heaters, if something goes wrong and your power generation isn't working, or worse, is destroyed, you could be in serious trouble. This is why I recommend making a small battery bank and make sure they aren't on the main circuit. That way, if you need emergency power, you've got it. In a normal Rimworld playthrough, you might be able to get away without batteries out in space, but that's way too risky, especially if you're going to be running with mods. That's not the case at all. Number 25. Boomlopes are now your friend. You need chem fuel, and they provide it. Set up a little farm and get to milking. Just make sure to release any new baby boomlopes if you get any. I'm serious about this. While some ranching might be a bit tricky to do on a ship, having a few boomlopes to keep a supply of chem fuel is very useful, though I recommend keeping the bond very far from anything flammable. Maybe also make a few extra cleaning robots, given you can't put hay down on gravship tiles. Number 26. For actual animals to bring on the ship that don't have a chance to turn your ship into a fireball, there really isn't anything I feel is a must-have or shouldn't take on. Given we now have an item to literally make animals smarter and therefore give them better training options, I recommend doing whatever you feel is right. Want to make a Noah's Ark on your grav ship? You can. Want to just have your best canine or feline friend in space? Do it. Want to just collect the rare new stuff? Do that. Just remember to take into account the space and food needed for them. Otherwise, set up a proper base for them to live at and set a grav ship anchor. Number 27. Speaking of that, don't be afraid to set up a permanent base with a grav anchor. While Odyssey is all about exploration and using the grav ship, you can still come back home to the ground support team. This also would help in reducing the space load of a ship having its focus on perhaps exploration, quest completion, or even just for that one best place to call home. Number 28. Turrets are your best friend out in space. I highly recommend setting up on each corner of a ship a uranium slug turret or two, with some mini or autocannon turrets for support. This is mostly to help pick off some people that will be coming your way, especially useful for when you have to clear out some space ruins that could be filled with mechanoids or people. Number 29. When it comes to actually taking those bases, my best advice, hit and run. Open doors, leave them open, and draw out mechanoids from each room. Let slug turrets or groups of well-armed homies take out each mechanoid bit by bit. Given you have to wait a bit for grav cores to recharge before you can leave again, it's fine to take your time on these missions. Heck, if you have more than enough material, set up traps before opening the doors, like IEDs and turrets. Now, for stations with scavengers, you will be swarmed by them as they are already out in the open. Advice for you is to park your ship in a way where only one way is able to be accessed, and don't let enemy pawns get the chance to get up and close to your turrets. That's a bad time. Take advantage of empty space. It makes for a nice moat. Number 30. Finally, a bit of advice. Never be afraid to run if you got a grav ship. You can get out of any area or bad situation with it. You can rebuild, of course. Sometimes life sucks. I get it, but hey, if you can rebuild, you can keep that story going. Plus, it's hilarious to see raiders on your ship come along for the ride, especially if you take them to space without a spacesuit. And on a final note, I hope this advice could help you on your Odyssey trip. Again, I love this DLC. It really does add so much good to the game and acts as a good framework for more adventures. Now, if you all have any advice you want to share, you know where to post it. The comment section, and heck, even our Discord. I'd like to thank all the Patrons that support us and all the channel members that support us as well. It really helps us out, and we really appreciate the help. We'll see you all in the next one.